Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Today I'm looking at one of my all-time favourite Hornby tank engines. Today's locomotive is not currently in Hornby's range, and usually when I start a review of a loco like this, I'll say something like, let's find out whether this is a loco we want to see return to Hornby's range or whether it should stay gone. But today I am not asking this question because this is a loco that I would definitely like to see come back because, like I say, it's one of my all-time favourites. However, I've not done a proper look at this loco for a good number of years. I'm interested to know whether it's as good as I remember or whether actually it doesn't stack up that well against new products that we see in the industry. So the loco is this. It is the legendary Hornby J50. And the reason I would love to see this loco come back is that it's actually a pre-grouping locomotive. It originated from the Great Northern Railway. And yet, as far as I know, Hornby have only ever produced this model in LNER and BR liveries. And this one is, of course, an LNER livery. And I guess the reason for that is back when this model was first brought out, probably coming up for about 10 years ago now, the pre-grouping era wasn't that interesting to people. Not very many manufacturers were actually producing pre-grouping locos, so I guess the thought probably never occurred to Hornby. Today, of course, pre-grouping locos sell like hotcakes, and a J50 or a J23, I think it was, from the Great Northern would presumably sell incredibly well. I'm not sure what would be required to convert this loco into a Great Northern one. Would they be able to just repaint it, or would some retooling be required? I'm not too sure, but imagine this in a Great Northern livery. It would be amazing. Anyway, this was bought quite a few years ago, and back then the prices were incredibly reasonable. The RRP, that's the full price for this loco, was £74.99. I believe the price did go up after that, but I can't find any record of it. So yeah, that's the RRP as far as I know. And I paid for this one brand new £72.50. Seems like an absolute bargain by today's standards, but of course prices have gone up, and prices like £72.50 for a loco like this are just not a thing anymore. But I'm glad I got this one so inexpensively. Let's take a look at it, let's see what it's like, and let's see whether this is a loco that we want to see return, possibly in a Great Northern livery. That would be awesome. Okay, let's get started. So, as you can see, this loco comes in a very small and neat box, which I like a lot. It's a small and neat loco, so I guess that makes sense. And there's the photo of it on the front of the box, looking very unusual. It's another reason why I love the J50. Let me show you the end of the box then. So the version I've got is R3324. It is in the LNER livery. It's a J50 class, and the number of mine is 635. And these have the running numbers printed in large numbers on the side of the tanks. If I show you the back of the box, you can see that these were classified as 4F locomotives, which is quite powerful, I suppose, for a Great Northern pre-grouping freight loco. So, yep, quite powerful. And then you've got a brief history of the class over on the other side. Pause and read that if you'd like to. For now, though, I'm going to get this loco out, and we're going to see if this is as good as I remember. I remember this being a very impressive model with some great weight to it as well. So I'm looking forward to sort of holding this in my hands, weighing it, and seeing how it compares to more modern, more expensive locos. So there it is. Yeah, such a cool looking loco, and I'll talk a bit more about why it looks so unusual later on in the history section. But let's get it out for now. Let's pull out the blister pack, which is there, and it has got some accessories in the bottom there, which I'll look at in just a moment. For now though, let's have a look at this one first, because this is a little bit different. All J50 models, it says, fitting a decoder. Due to limited space internally to allow for fitting of a Hornby R whatever decoder, one of the tank weights has been made to be removable from inside of the body to create the required space. So the loco then is obviously super heavy, but to make it so heavy, they've sacrificed a space for the decoder. So if you're running on analog, that doesn't matter at all. You've got a nice heavy loco. If you want to chip this, you've got to sacrifice some of the loco's weight to fit in a decoder. Seems a little bit unnecessary, really. It's quite a large loco. I reckon this could have been made heavy and still had plenty of room for a decoder, like the Bachmann 94XX, let's say, which is incredibly heavy, but still has room for decoders. Right, anyway, J50 class, printed on nice glossy paper. Let's open this up and take a look. So you can see the lubrication points. Annoyingly, that doesn't show a proper diagram of the mechanism, so we'll get the body off later on and take a look at that. Body removal, this is going to be important for that reason. So it looks like 2 screws at the front, 1 at the back. That'll get the body off. You can see accessories if included. It's not a guarantee then, but this does come with them. So you've got couplings to fit and also vacuum pipes for the buffer beams. That's fine. There's the 8-pin socket. Yeah, it's quite an old loco now, so it doesn't have a more modern socket than that, or any lights or special features, if I remember correctly, but that's what it is. And then brake rods, and we'll take a look at those in a second too. All right, with that then, let's get this J50 out and let's have a look. It is feeling pretty weighty, I must say. So, yep, let's get it out. Very well packaged as well. Look at all the foam protecting the loco there. Yeah, it's pretty good, although I do seem to remember the foam rubbing off some of the paint on this. I'll have to find out for sure whether that was this loco. Anyway, we've got an accessories pack here, which contains the brake rigging as promised, so you can fit that if you want. Although I'm not seeing any pipes in this one, we've just got the couplings. So yeah, maybe the pipes are pre-fitted to this loco. This bag has been opened, I must have opened it for some reason. So possibly I took those out for whatever reason, I'm not sure. How does this one open again? Oh, it's at this end, isn't it? Yeah, it's weird. So it kind of just pops open. And then there we have it. All right, so there it is. Look at this thing. This is not just a plain black loco either. It's got the lining on it, which I like very much. All right, let's lift this up and take a look. So yeah, this one does not come with any pipe work because the buffer beams have no holes in them. So this is obviously an earlier version of the model before it was fitted with vacuum braking or whatever. But yeah, there it is, the Hornby J50. A delightfully unusual looking loco, and sure enough, it's got some great weight to it. However, the running plate is just plastic and the body seems to be plastic as well, which is very strange, isn't it? Because if they'd have, say, made the boiler or the tanks or the running plate metal instead of those weights on the inside to make up the mass of the thing, then they could have made this a really heavy model and still had space inside for a decoder. It's a bit of a strange design choice, really, not one that we see today from Hornby or really any manufacturers. Yeah, taking parts of the model out to fit a decoder, that's definitely not something I see very often. But either way, there is the loco. It looks absolutely fantastic and the level of detail does seem to be just great. So I will certainly show you this in a lot more detail in just a moment. But for now, let's have a bit of background on the J50 in real life. So, as I've been saying, the L&ER J50 actually started life on the GNR, or the Great Northern, where it was known as the J23 after its introduction in 1913. The class was designed by Sir Nigel Gresley, who intended the class to be used for shunting and goods work. The first examples were built using spare boilers left over from old L1 locomotives who had been upgraded to use larger boilers, and so the old boilers were used in the initial J23s. More J23s would be built in 1922, also with second-hand boilers. I think most of them had second-hand boilers, although these boilers were slightly smaller, which would later cause the L&ER to split the class into 2 classes, the J50 and the J51. The J50s were the ones with the larger boilers. The design was unusual in that the side tanks were absolutely massive, and therefore they had to slope downwards towards the front in order to improve visibility. The tanks also completely blocked access to the valve gear and other areas necessary to maintain, and so arched recesses were cut into the bottom of the tanks towards the front in order to allow access for maintenance. The class worked all the way through the grouping era under the L&ER ownership and well into the BR era following nationalisation. Withdrawal began for the class in 1958, and by 1965 all examples had been scrapped with no original survivors. So there it is up close and personal for you, Hornby's good old J50 locomotive. And I think this is a truly fabulous model that really showcases Hornby at their very best. No expense is spared with this loco in spite of a very reasonable price tag, which is something that we don't see from Hornby very often these days. But sure enough, this loco packs in a lot of features for a £75 loco at RRP. Very, very impressive indeed. One aspect that is particularly impressive, and I've mentioned it already, is the weight. This comes in at 272 grams, which is a lot more than some of Hornby's more recent tender locomotives. It's more than a Hornby Hull class by quite a bit, including its tender. It's more than a Raven Q6, again, including its tender, and it's only 10 grams lighter than the famous Bachmann 94XX, which I think is the heaviest tank engine in the collection, or at least one of them. So a great amount of weight despite just having a plastic body. You can only imagine how much this would have weighed if they'd added a bit of die cast to the running plate or the boiler or something like that. Anyway, let's take a closer look at this loco and its level of detail. We'll start with the decoration, and as you can see, this has been done to a high standard. So glad I was able to find one of these with all of the lining on it, because the boiler looks excellent, the tanks are fully lined as well, and you've got the beautiful LNER lettering and numbering on there, which is great to see. All of the steps are lined, the cab area, cab roof, everything, coal bunker got lining on it. For a freight loco, that is really, really cool to see. There's a builder's plate at the front of the tank, which is a good print as well, you can see that. And even the splasher behind the tank, sort of hidden in the recess there, has lining on it, which is impressive too. The buffer beams are also incredibly nicely painted and lined at the front as well. So a really beautiful loco. The finish is a tiny bit plasticky, but to say that this is a few years old now, it's actually not too bad at all. The finish not too far off from Hornby's more modern locos. Let's take a look at the level of detail there, and we'll start towards the bottom of the engine where there is even detail on the chassis. You can see all of that, the riveting and such. Pipework beneath the cab, which is separately fitted and separately painted. This is very fragile, and the piece underneath the steps here is completely unsupported, so you have to be careful not to catch that, because at the very least you'll warp it and bend it out of shape. At the very worst, you'll break it off. The coupling rods, crank pins all look excellent on properly moulded wheels, which looks great. No visible axles poking through either, because they would be way over scale for this thing. So that's really good to see. Around the front you can see we've got a coupling hook without a coupling though, and no coupling was provided, which is unfortunate. I always like it when those are included. Sadly that wasn't the case here, although that was reflected in the price I think. Although we do have metal buffers which are sprung. Look at that. Yep, sprung buffers, what a lovely feature. And then above the buffer beam we have an array of lamp brackets. Below a very highly detailed smoke box door which has more lamp brackets, a handrail and a separately fitted smoke box dart. Beautifully detailed front to this loco, I like it a lot. Here is the recess which has the reverser rod visible inside it. That is so cool, and even beyond there you can see we've got the valve gear model too. An incredible level of detail really. Up on top of the boiler we've got a pipe here which is separately fitted, and we've also got water filler caps up on top of the tanks which look good. The safety valves here are actually made of metal, although I suspect that they have been sort of moulded like that and then painted, because they certainly don't have the finish of a turned metal piece. Same thing is true of the whistle as well. Yeah, plasticky finish to that. Whether or not it's made of metal, I'm not sure, but it is a tiny piece, so no big deal. Yeah, decent detail on the loco. The dome appears to be a part of the moulding, so there's no big gaps around that. And the chimney is a separately fitted piece, so presumably there's a bit of tooling variation that can go on with that, but again it is quite subtly separately fitted, which is good. The cab is a particularly detailed area. We've got wire handrails around the cab doors, which look good. The glazing is excellent as well. It's nice and flush on the outside of the model, yet on the inside there is no glazing piece which bridges between the two windows. They are individually glazed, which looks a lot better. And then the cab interior is pretty good as well for a loco with such limited cab visibility. Separately fitted parts inside there, separately painted pipework and everything. The gauges haven't been picked out, so we have seen better cabs than this, but overall I think it's pretty darn good. No lighting on this one though, so you've got no firebox flicker or anything like that. The vent on top of the cab is separately fitted, as you can see, and then around the back you've got a very nice moulded grille effect over the rear glazing, which also looks very convincing. The coal bunker is a particularly favourite feature of mine because you've got this guard around it, which looks great, and then the coal load itself is a very finely detailed piece, which I like very much. Around the back you've got quite a few moulded lamp brackets this time, although the relief on those is pretty good. The one at the top though is separately fitted. You can see some blemishes in the decoration on the back here, where those foam pads on the packaging have been pressing against the model. So maybe it's a bit too tight a fit in the packaging, maybe it was placed into the packaging before the paint was completely dry. I'm not sure, but that has spoiled the back of the model very slightly. You've got another buffer beam, no lining on it this time, but it's got the same details, more or less. And then you've got the NEM pocket at the back. It doesn't fit in the packaging without the couplings, so you have to add those after you've unpacked the loco. But there you go, the Hornby J50, an awful lot of detail on this thing, and a loco that is bursting with character. The way these tanks slide down at the front is delightfully unusual, and yet somehow the class still has that elegance of the Gresley design, which is great to see. So let's get this down onto the track, let's see how it runs, and let's also take a look at its mechanism. So there she is, Hornby's gorgeous J50 down onto the track, and I'm going to show you the performance in just a second. First of all though, let's talk about the mechanism, and I used to tell people back in the day that Hornby was my favourite manufacturer because the mechanisms of a Hornby loco were way better than all the rest, and it was locos like this one that led me to that conclusion back in the day. So let me show you what is so great about this loco. It's got all-wheel pickup, as you can see, proper wiper pickups going to each of its wheels, which is awesome. The base keeper plate is nice and easy to remove. It's attached via screws, not clips, and when those screws are undone, you can remove it entirely for cleaning the pickups and also accessing the axles and that sort of thing. It's connected to the chassis electrically via these spring-loaded contacts, which makes servicing so much quicker and simpler. I wish all manufacturers would do this. You can see we've also got proper bearings on the driving axles. Every single axle has those, and the loco is driven by its centre axle. So nice and simple, no over-engineering here. The body is similarly easy to remove. It's attached via just 3 screws, and undoing these allows you to remove the body fully. And these screws, look, they're not even self-tapping screws. They screw into proper separately fitted threads. Such a high quality mechanism. And here is the chassis, which is all die-cast, very, very heavy chassis this. Even the coal bunker look is just completely filled with this die-cast chassis, which is why the loco is so heavy. It also has a 5-pole motor, which is great. That should produce some really nice slow running. And it also has a flywheel fitted to it as well, which is a feature I always look out for. It does just have the 8-pin DC-C socket, which was perfectly okay when this loco was produced, although now of course you'd expect a Next 18 or something. There'd be a lot more room in this loco for one of those. No extras or anything like that, no speaker fitted or lights, but again that was fairly standard for this era. The gauge then came in at 14.2 to 14.4, so a little bit inconsistent, but comfortably below the standard, which usually produces some good runners. So truly a high quality mechanism, so much better than the likes of Bachmann at the time. I was very, very impressed when I first got this. So that's the mechanism, very good indeed. Let's now move on and talk about performance, and let's give this a test. Does the loco still run? Let's find out. And I'm being slightly theatrical here because I know it still works, because I had it running in a little bit before this review. But for you, let's see. There you go, nice smooth performance. It is working, as you can see. And even though it's going slowly, it is running smoothly, which is really good. So no jerkiness at these speeds. Really, really nice. Let's have a look and see what the crawl is like then. It's a very heavy loco, so there's quite a lot of loco to move at a crawl. But let's see if this can do it. You ready? I'm just going to ease it up very gradually, and we'll see what it can do. These locos did a fair bit of shunting, so it's reasonably important that they can do this well. Still turning it up. Oh, starting to go. Does it perhaps needs a bit more? There you go, so it's moving, quite coggy, but the fact that it is able to move itself so slowly is quite impressive, and of course Don't think you'd really want it to move this slowly, so let's go a bit further. Ooh. And then it becomes sort of smooth at that kind of speed, which is still very, very good. So I think there are better crawlers out there, possibly because they are lighter and it's easier to move those locos at such a slow motor speed. But I don't think this is bad at all. And at these speeds, ooh, a bit more. Yeah, at these speeds, it is perfectly smooth, which is good. So, yeah, it's a decent runner overall. Let me show you what the torque is like. So I'll put my finger in front of the buffers. Let's give it 50. As you can see, there is some decent torque there. It's able to turn its wheels. And let's also talk about the gearing. Let me run past at 50, show you what that looks like. Ready? 50. So I would say it's reasonably sensible in its gearing. It doesn't race along. And again, that means that the slower speeds are nice and smooth with plenty of torque as well, which is good. So the pulling power, because of its massive weight, remember 272 grams, that's nothing to sniff at for such a small loco. That gives it a tractive effort of 0.42 newtons or 26 coaches on straight and level track. That's the same as the Rapido 16XX, which was entirely die-cast on the outside. It's even more than a Hornby A3. You believe that? A full Hornby A3 with a tender is less powerful than this on the track. So it's quite an impressive beast. To test its haulage, I have set up some wagons, as you can see, probably 15, 20 of these, so not really a massive test of its abilities, but I would say if it can haul these, then there's not much you could reasonably throw at this thing that it would not be able to manage. So, reverse, let's go and test the couplings. And I've just fitted the coupling to the loco that came in the accessories bag because I'd rather keep the front of the loco clear of that sort of thing. Right, so how are the coupling heights? I noticed there was a bit of trouble getting it coupled there initially, but it did go in the end. Let's have a look, let's just push them back together. So it looks to me as though the Hornby one is drooping down below the level of the wagon coupling. Let me just double check to make sure that it is in properly, and then we'll try it again. Right, yes, the coupling is correctly fitted. The pocket is pushed all the way in, so yeah, it's not something that I've done. Let's try that one more time, a little bit quicker. Doesn't look like it's far off because obviously it did couple in the end, but yeah, you see, struggling there, isn't it? So yeah, coupling's not brilliant. Let's see if I can just bend it upwards a little bit. Will it go then? I don't remember having this issue before with this, but yeah, it's certainly not at the right height. Try again. There we go, we got it there. So yeah, not perfect actually, but they are now coupled. So let's start off the J50 with a freight train. Here we go. I'll go a little bit slowly, about 40 speed I think. Yeah, that looks really good. So we'll tune back in with the J50 in a second and we'll see how it's getting on around the curves and such. Right, so this Hornby J50 is stopped on the points. Give it a little push. One of my favourite tank engines. On the middle line, I'm going to run the only other ready-to-run J50 that I'm aware of, and this is what I would consider to be one of my least favourite tank engines. This is a Lima one, and compared with Hornby's, it is terrible. It is a product of its time, and that's true, to be fair, but even when this was new, there were so many better models than this. It doesn't even have its centre wheels coupled up to its coupling rods. They're just free to turn. Nasty piece of work, so you can imagine when the Hornby one came out, how much of an improvement that really was. So let's get this started. That's about as slow as it can go. The Lima J50. And then on the inside line we have, is it an NER, NBR? We'll have a look when it gets in. It's an E1 anyway, which is a slightly newer tank engine, but from the same kind of era. And this is NER. Yes, NER, and that's a Bachmann one. Right, let's catch up with the J50. And don't forget to see which other 060s there are on the layout today, and if you can spot an odd one out, I will pin the first person to correctly identify it. So the J50 not slowing down noticeably on the curves at all there, and it's got quite a few wagons behind it, and they don't seem to be causing it any problems whatsoever. So pulling power and torque, actually quite a lot better than we see on several modern locos really, so that is impressive. Overall then, this is a beautiful loco. It looks great. It's got a truly impressive level of detail for the time, if not completely up to modern standards, but I think it's close enough. And if this was available for £75 or anything less than £100 really, I think people would be most happy to overlook the lack of lights or pre-fitted speaker or that kind of thing. You know, it's perfectly adequate, looks the part, really high quality, nicely put together, and of course it runs nicely as well. So it truly is the full package. Great value, great looking loco, and it's an interesting prototype as well. I think a bit more interesting than your other LNER locos, your A4s, your A3s, the P2s. Impressive machines, don't get me wrong, but I'd rather take something like this any day. So the fact that Hornby used to produce this sort of thing back in the day was really awesome, I thought, and this is one that I've always enjoyed. If Hornby were to bring this back, I do think they could do more with it. Again, if this was available in a Great Northern livery of some description, I think that would really give the model a new lease on life. Obviously, if this could be achieved just by a repaint of this model, then that is something I believe we truly could see. If some sort of retooling would be required, if new parts, different detailing would be necessary in order to do that, then maybe that's not something we're going to see. But I can keep my fingers crossed, and hopefully if there is demand for such a thing, then it is something we will see from Hornby one day, because at the end of the day it's going to be cheaper to produce than some other new tooled locomotive, isn't it? Even if they do have to tool up a few different pieces for it. So that's something I have very much got my fingers crossed for. What a beautiful loco. Let's have some ratings then for the really wonderful Hornby J50, and I'm pleased to say this is just as good as I remember it being, and it really does hold up to more modern locos. Level of detail for me is a 4-star. It's a beautifully detailed model. The decoration is really good, lots of lining, beautiful lettering, that kind of thing. Masses of detail as well. Between the frames, hidden underneath the tanks, you've got detail, beautiful cab, sprung buffers, lovely finish on the model as well. It does, however, have a relatively mediocre cab, I would say. Certainly not bad by any means, but we have seen better. It doesn't have the screw link or 3-link couplings for its buffer beams, and it is missing modern flashy features such as lighting, but overall those don't really count against this model very much. The performance for me again is a 4-star. It's a beautiful smooth runner, very heavy like I say, so it can haul a decent freight train without any issues whatsoever. Right down at the slowest speeds, while it is very slow, it's not that controlled. It does seem to stutter a little bit at the very slowest speeds, and the torque isn't the greatest in the world, although at the higher speeds there's no problem with that either. Maybe I'm being quite harsh here, giving it only 4-star on performance, because it is excellent, but I do think other locos have performed slightly better than this. The pulling power though cannot be faulted. 26 coaches or 0.42 newtons. It's a very, very powerful loco for its size. Well worth putting all of that weight into it, I think. The mechanism, similarly, I cannot fault, so I've given it 5-star. We've got pickups on all wheels, proper bearings on the axles, very serviceable and easy to access, 5-pole motor, and of course a flywheel on the motor as well. A true 5-star mechanism, really high quality here from Hornby. The quality on the whole, again, is really good. I've given it 4-star. It does lose just 1-star because of the plastic body construction. I think a little bit more metal work on here would have been great. It's a little bit fragile in areas. The pipe work underneath the cab, for instance, is very easy to catch, and I think it would have been easy to anchor that a little bit better so that it was less fragile. Apart from that, it's the packaging really damaging the paintwork slightly. Not a big deal again, and it's only in that one area around the back of the bunker, but I do want to reflect that. Value for money, again, I've given this 5-star because I can't fault it, although of course you should take this with a pinch of salt, because if Hornby were to bring back the J50, I'm pretty sure the RRP would not be less than £75 as this was. But yeah, it was when I bought it. £74.99 was the RRP, and £72.50 was what I paid from the retailer, which is no other than 5-star for me. Overall then, that is 8.84 out of 10, a really, really good score there. Grade of A, in fact. Boosted, I think, by the value score, which I don't think would be a 5 today, but there's not much I can do about that. So into the logbook it goes, very high up, just above the Hornby S15, which again is another model from this sort of era. They really were making them good back then. And below the Athon SD60E. Great loco if you can find one second hand in good condition and for the right price. It's a loco I can highly recommend. Well folks, that will just about do it for this review. I do hope you enjoyed revisiting the Hornby J50 with me. And yet again, looking back at Hornby's past, I am finding that the locos there were truly very, very impressive. Level of detail more or less equal to what we see from Hornby today, and yet in some areas, such as build quality and mechanism quality, quite a bit better than we see from Hornby today, which is not something that I'm always expecting when I start these reviews, but it's certainly something that I am finding to be true more often than not, so that's very interesting. So thank you very much for watching. Do keep an eye out for the Hornby J50 because it's a great loco, and again, if you like Gresley and your A1s and A4s and such, well, this is a way to add to your Gresley fleet with a loco that's a little bit different from the rest. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you very, very soon. You take care, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right, cheers everybody.